So welcome everyone to the third training for Floodlight, and we're happy to see those of you who've been here before and happy to welcome those of you who are new. My name is Laura Frank. I'm the Executive Director of iNews. We're a nonprofit newsroom that helps others tell stories that make a difference. So I'm a journalist, and my friend Danny is a social scientist, and you'll notice for those of you who've seen him before, he looks a little different today. I'll let him explain.
I am on sabbatical, and so I'm not in Colorado right now. I am in New York, but I'm really happy to be here for this third training. We're going to learn a little more about refining our story, and we're going to use some tools today that eventually you'll be using on the Floodlight website. So we're really happy to have you here.
Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. So if you could say what your name is and the organization you're with, and something that's a strength in your community. Ruben
Medina, I'm with the City of Aurora Programs Department, which is Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. I run a recreation center. What's unique about ours is the diversity.
My name is Kevin Jones. I'm the Vice President for Development at Young Americans Center for Financial Education. Some people may know Young Americans Bank or may even know a program of ours called Young Ameritown. And something that I think is really wonderful about this Colorado community right now is a desire to foster entrepreneurship. There's a real commitment to innovation and pulling together to take Denver to the next level.
My name is Ashley Geisen, and I'm the Director of Development and Communications at Denver Kids, Inc. And one thing that I really love about the Denver community currently is their commitment to be inclusive to all voices at the table.
So my name is Norma Brambilla. I'm coming from Livewell. I'm one of the connectors between the community. And one of the things that I like from my community is that I think we're getting together and getting ready for the change.
I'm Nicole Steffen. I'm with WestStaff, which is the Western States Art Federation. I'm working on a project that is focused on helping arts organizations measure their creative economy.
And did you want to talk about
Well, I am relatively new to the organization, so I enjoy being part of an arts organization and the idea of helping them to better understand how to measure what's going on in the arts. I will be able to fill people in a little bit more on that as I learn.
Okay, good. I'm Lynn Montague-Klaus, and I'm with Metro Volunteers. I'm active in a number of different capacities in Northeast Denver, which is what I really consider my community. And I think the thing I find the most exciting about everything that's going on is Northeast Denver. In Northeast Denver are all of the collaborations that are taking place among many, many, many different organizations who are all really trying to work towards some overarching goals. And Denver Kids and Live Well are very much a part of that, and I just think it's really exciting.
Hi, I'm Ron Washington with the Fields Foundation, and that's in Aurora, and I live in Aurora, and actually I live about 5 minutes from where the tragedy happened. And unlike my friend here in Aurora, diversity is one of the strengths of it. Another thing I notice is the opportunity and the promise it has, tremendous, and I encourage a lot of people to understand that this tragedy has actually brought light to Aurora, and now we have an opportunity to show the world these aspects it has.
Hi, I'm Jordan Worfsbrock. I'm with the Piton Foundation, and I've been helping to create and manage the Floodlight project. And something that I really love about Denver and that I've gotten to see through my time at Piton is all of the optimism, the relentless optimism that everyone has working in the field of community change. So.
We're going to focus our story even more, and we're going to start to use some of the language of Floodlight. And the first thing we want to get started on is a summary. So for those of you who've been thinking about what story you want to tell that's powerful and will inspire action and reaction, you've been able last month to boil that down to sort of a 5-minute version. Today we're going to go even further. We're going to get it down to 1 or 2 sentences. And the summary is really important, an important part of your story for two reasons. I can tell you as a journalist, if you start out summarizing what the story is about, it's much easier than to tell the whole story because it focuses you on what the story is, and then you can see what needs to fit under that umbrella to buttress and strengthen the rest of the story. When you start using Floodlight, you will be actually prompted to have a summary. A box will appear and you will type in the summary, and this is a sort of a promise to the person who may be reading or watching your story later, a promise about what they're going to get if they invest the time to follow it. Danny, you want to touch a little bit on data?
Yeah, so using the Floodlight tool, you'll also have the chance to add data to your story. Data, if you were previous trainings, remember, can mean anything from numbers. I mean, that's how most of us usually think of data. But data can also mean an interview with someone informed about the situation, a video that you captured on your phone witnessing something in your community, an interview you did with a close friend who was close to the situation that you are trying to describe.
So it might help just to have an idea of what we're talking about here, just an example. At iNews, we recently did a story about type 2 diabetes and children getting that disease. And we could have done a sort of straightforward story saying, hey, isn't it terrible that children are now getting type 2 diabetes, a disease that used to, be called adult onset diabetes because only adults got it. And that would have been okay. But we really wanted to take some data that buttressed the story, that strengthened it. Sometimes we call it bulletproofing the story. I did a training this morning for some students at Manual High School, and I told them, you want to make your story unassailable. And then we had a discussion about what that meant. And that's what you want to do too. You want to have your story so strong that people can't deny it, they can't doubt it. They have to believe and be touched by what you've said. So in this case, in the type 2 diabetes story, there was one data point that really seemed to speak to the problem, and that was 20 years ago, no kids got type 2 diabetes. It just didn't occur. But today in Colorado, almost once a week, a child is diagnosed with a disease that used to only occur in adults. Now, do you see how that pulls you into the story? It gives you immediately the sense of this story is going to be factual and important, and I want to know more about it. There's apparently some studies have been done. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to the stories in a minute. But now really it's your turn. It's your turn to try to do this. So for those of you who are new, what we want you to do is think about what story related to your organization is really important for people to know. So some of the folks who've been here before told the story of their organization and what it does. And maybe they told it chronologically, how it got started and why and what it's doing now. Or maybe they told it through the point of view of someone that their organization served and the difference it made in that person's life. So there are many ways to tell a story. I want you to think in your minds about what story you're telling and then boil it down into 1 or 2 sentences that will tell me what I'm going to get if I invest time in reading, or if you do a video or audio, watching and listening to your story. You've got some clipboards here and some paper. We're going to take about 10 minutes to give you time to do this. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll come over and try to help.
If we don't know real data, should we not make it up?
Well, this isn't something that is going to be posted anywhere. It's just a practice. So sometimes I do that in my mind. If I don't know the exact real data, I may say I'm going to get the data that show, how many of every 10 children experience this, or what percentage of the population, or whatever the data might be. Yeah, so I forgot
That's
to.
okay. At our last meeting, we talked about the broad definition of data. And since we do have a number of people who are new, I wonder if that might be helpful, because I know it was really helpful for me.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so data can be, like Danny was saying, what we normally think of when we hear the word data are figures, numbers. But it can also be, and you'll have the chance in Floodlight, other things that strengthen your story. So it might be the audio interview of an expert in the topic, or it might be a photograph of something happening that your story is about that proves that it's happening. I gave an example earlier this morning when I was doing the training with the high schoolers about heavy trucks coming through the neighborhood. Well, they could document that by taking pictures and videos, and that would be data that would buttress their story. It might be video as well. It could be documents. It might be the law or the lack of a law, a policy or the lack of a policy. When we say data in this context, we're talking about anything that can strengthen your story, any factual thing that can strengthen your story. Hi. Doing fine. How are you? What's your name and where are you from?
Antonio Adams. I'm from Denver, Colorado.
And what organization, Antonio?
I'm actually independent.
Oh, fabulous. We're glad you're here. Okay. We're glad you're here. So what we're doing now is thinking about a story we want to tell, something that the public needs to know about whatever work we may be doing or issue we believe people need to know about, whatever inspires you. And for people who were in this training before, they boiled their story down to a 5-minute version. You get to skip that and go straight to 1 or 2 sentences. So I gave an example just a minute ago where the organization that I'm with, iNews, did a story about kids getting type 2 diabetes. And so our summary of this story was 20 years ago, no children developed type 2 diabetes. In fact, it was called adult onset diabetes. Today in Colorado, almost every week, a child is diagnosed with adult onset diabetes. That tells you, that's a summary of the story. You know, I'm going to write the rest of it later, and you can read it. But the summary of the story is what will pull you in and tell you, if you invest your time in this story, here's what you're going to find out. And we really want it strengthened with some data and some facts that tell people this is a serious story that's going to give you valuable and reliable information, and it's worth your time. So you can take the next 10 minutes just sort of thinking of 2 sentences that would entice me to read the rest of your story. Thank you. Now, while you're thinking of these sentences, you can jot down some notes on what data you might have that would strengthen it. So Kevin was asking, well, if I don't have the data now, he could write down some sources of data. You know, maybe I need to look up the law that governs this issue, or I need to collect some census data for this community, or whatever it might be. I need to do an audio interview, record an audio interview, or take a photograph. Make some notes on that, and we'll add that to the discussion. Now, if you want, while other people are finishing up, you could try out your sentences on your neighbor and see if you can get any feedback from your neighbor on how powerful the sentences are. Does it do what you're hoping it can do? And then we're going to share it with the whole group.
We've been working on ours for like 3 years. So.
Really?
56%. I do March 5th.
Took our story and made it 5 minutes. Now you're boiling it down into 1 or 2 sentences. And this is, we're starting to use some of the terms of Floodlight. And Floodlight will prompt you for a summary of your story. And this is your chance to tell people what they're going to get if they go ahead and read or watch your story. So take your story and boil it into one or two sentences.
It's much harder than writing
Yeah.
longer.
Or use that story to say how this accomplishes. Say maybe a couple years ago, we didn't have any John or
And then to share them on
Okay, we have about 3 more minutes to go, but while you have one last chance to look over it, I've been listening to some of your conversations, and I heard someone say this is not a sales pitch. That's true. Really keep in mind that what you're trying to do is pull someone into a story. And what stories do you really remember? Are they stories that are just facts and figures? Or are they stories that touch you emotionally somehow? So you want to have a balance. We don't want it too data heavy. Take a look at what you're doing. And remember, the assignment is 1 or 2 sentences that pull you into the story and promise you what you're going to get if you invest your time in reading or watching the rest of it. So take one more look at it, and then we'll share with the group.
Please listen to my story.
Okay. I think we will start on this side of the circle and go around. And what we're going to do, this is a very sort of relaxed and laid back, we're all friends here. What we want to do is sort of lay out what we think our summary is, and then give each other some feedback. How could we make it even stronger and better? But in a gentle way, please. Okay, Antonio, do you want to start?
I would love to start, but I don't know. Microphone?
Oh, microphone, please.
Can you start?
Oh, you want? Oh, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can she start? No, I'm just kidding.
No, we only have one pass.
Next thing you know, we had,
Yeah.
it was just,
Only one pass.
The game show doesn't. That's
No,
not
no.
bad. Okay. Ron Washington Fields Foundation. Most of you know, and I have notes here, and we were just talking about that. Usually, the notes speak for themselves. If you're passionate about your message and what you're doing, there shouldn't be any notes, but I have some. It started when there was a guy who got murdered. And so murder always brings people's attention. It was a youth in Aurora, and he was a witness to a murder, and he was threatened, and then he was killed before he was able to testify. So that's compelling. It got everyone's attention, right? I get goosebumps on it because it's a true story, and that's what started this foundation. Out of that, we started a nonprofit and started giving scholarships to students at CSU in Fort Collins. It's been going on for 7 years. And most of these students are students out of Aurora. Actually, they all are. And that's been, I would call it successful by the fact that we are empowering students and raising money to do so and getting supported by different organizations. We've been telling our story for 7 years through website, through all the tools and medias that most of us have resources to. And now with this resource and tool, we're going to be even more able to do so, and as well as you will, to tell your stories as you develop your foundations and organizations. Some of you may be at a beginning stage, some of you, like my friend here, he just walked in for the first time, or some may have an organization that's older than ours. And there'll be different levels, but it's all about the same. You tell a story that's passionate. So off of that, back to the notes, I can't read. But off of those things, we really were inspired by the fact that we got action with our outreaches. And so now we're doing phase 2, which is addressing issues for students from 0 to 18 at high school, junior high school, middle school, and early childhood education in Aurora. And so by bringing this photo voice exhibit and using it as a tool, we're able to show the community and show people what are these issues we want to address.
Now, Ron, you're giving us the 5-minute version. That was last month.
And that's it.
No. Now we have to make you work.
Oh, my God.
The harder part is to take that chunk of information that you just gave us and give us a 1 or 2 sentence summary
Okay.
that will make us want to get into the deeper story
Okay.
and hear the rest of the details about the history, about the success.
Well, now my group gets to help me.
Yeah,
ideas
so
how we can
what
condense this?
stood out to you from what he said there? What might be 1 or 2 nuggets that would make you want to learn more about the Fields Foundation?
Well, what
Use the mic, please. I keep forgetting to remind you.
What really struck me, because this struck me after listening to them also last meeting talk about this, was moving from the tragedy of a murder to the good things that have come out of that through the Fields Foundation. And just if you could transition from those words, to me, that would pull me in.
So something like, from the tragedy of a young couple's murder to the transformation of lives in Aurora. Okay, somebody write that down, quick.
I just did.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I thought it was especially compelling about how they are empowering youth to thrive.
So getting to that idea, and that tells me that the story I'm about to read, let's say it's a written story, the story I'm about to read is going to tell me some kind of emotional story about someone who was murdered, and then something positive that grew out of this. It also tells me it's about Aurora, and Aurora has been in the news lately, so that may, okay, well, there's something powerful going on in Aurora that I'm about to learn about. What else could we put in there that might, be the tipping point to push me into reading the rest of your story on Floodlight? We talked a little bit last month about, is there one student's story that might be compelling? Are there measurements of success that, we've changed the lives of 100 young people? Something, sort of meaty
What we are doing,
like that.
One thing we are doing is we're tracking, formed a youth council. And I didn't get to mention that, but that's part of it because the youth, it's their voice. And then we came up with an idea called Photo Voice about a year ago, gave them cameras and told them to take these pictures. And that's kind of what developed the concept to where bringing to light the issues in the community.
Oh, that's great. So that's really what you want to tell about right now. You want to
Right.
tell me about Photo Voice.
Right.
So his sentence, okay, check me on whether we've got the sentence right. His sentence says something like, from the tragedy of a young couple's murder to the transformation
Of a community.
of a community, a program, now these aren't the words, but something that gets across the idea, a program for, the Photo Voice program does what?
So
Gives
sheds
youth-
light, illuminates, or initiates change. It does all those things because first is the condition, and then we gave the kids the camera, and we didn't tell them what to take pictures of. They just recorded their environment, and then that illuminated their truths, and so it's our job to put that out there. I don't know how to put that in a 2-minute thing without from there.
Right, go ahead.
I just have something because I was able to see the Photo Voice presentation that the students did, and what was really striking to me is that they all stood up and they said that before this experience, I did not feel like an activist, and then at the end of it, everyone stood up and said, like, I am now an activist in my community.
And it activated.
That's powerful.
So that,
Yeah.
and that was.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I heard the oh wow.
So are there any kind of data, either the number kind or the photo or the audio? What kinds of things could Ron add to his story in Floodlight that would really strengthen
Now,
what
for
he's
example, I
telling?
have data here.
Okay.
And this is one of my assets.
Okay.
And so, again, how do you give the data, what parts do you bring out in a summary, and I understand that, and that's a good idea, how to encapsulate what's key and important,
Well,
out of all these things, yeah.
you don't always need the key data in the summary.
Okay.
It's a judgment call
Right.
on your part.
If it's going to be impactful.
If it's sort of the crux of what your story is about, then you probably want to work it into the summary. So in your case, for example, if you can show that you've, I don't know, sent 100 students to, given scholarships to, I'm just making up a number, 200 kids or something like that, you might want to include it. But if your data assets that you're holding there are more supporting, then they just belong in the story.
I think
rather
a
than in the summary.
happy mix would be good,
Yeah.
too. There's facts here. When I do the elevator pitch, one thing that really struck me when I did the research, I went into the school, and the students didn't even know this. A few did, and I have it on tape. They said 1 out of 3 girls are pregnant in our high school. And one of the girls started elaborating on it. She says, yes, out of 936, 332 are, and she had the statistics, the numbers. And then 2 of them said an exclamation like, are you kidding me? They didn't know. So that kind of footage is real strong. And you put that out there, a community needs to know that. When I went to high school, 1 out of 3 of our girls weren't pregnant. And so when I say that to people, it draws them in. So
Yes.
that's a statistic to draw people in.
That's an excellent example. So maybe you want to do something like that. So your first sentence is, from the
That.
tragedy of the murder to the transformation of a community where 1 out of 3 girls was
are
pregnant,
in
and then
high
maybe you
school.
want 2 more, because humans like things in threes. If you can find 1,
Well-
2, 3 really kind of powerful things like that
One
say,
more
wow,
is the dropout rate is 2.5 times that in the state.
perfect. I mean, not good, but
Well, yeah,
that's the
but
perfect kind
well,
of data.
And then it makes you ask the question in our
Right.
story, why?
Right.
And
Right.
then so if the
Right.
reader or the listener hears that, then they want to know why.
And then you have to tell me that this is a story about, don't use the word program because it's a terrible word, but a something, this photo voice of an effort, something that is changing those outcomes by giving voice, by giving youth a voice, something like that. Okay,
And
so
that's pretty simple, and it
Right.
can't be, it was elaborate, but it can be done in a 2-minute
Right.
overview. It's
Right.
very impactful.
Right, so that was 3 sentences, I think. But if you
I'll
put a
work on
comma between the first 2, I think we can get by with 2 sentences. How
Right.
about we let
I'll
Lynn
work
try
on
it?
that.
Okay, yeah, quick, write it down before we forget, right?
Parents engaging in their children's education has a very positive impact on a student's achievement in school. The school service program is a structure within a school that allows parents and community members to effectively partner with schools to volunteer in ways that will be meaningful to student success.
Okay, Lynn, what did you think of that when you heard yourself read it out loud?
Yeah, I was trying to get a lot of stuff in, and I know that when I write it, it's what I want to say, but there's nothing compelling about that.
Okay.
Is what I thought.
But it's a compelling issue, so how can we
Right.
get at what she's talking about in a more compelling way? So why don't you give it to us again,
Okay.
and let's all think about what...
Parents
Pull out.
engaging in their children's education has a very positive impact on a student's achievement in school. The school service program is a structure within a school that allows parents and community members to effectively partner with schools to volunteer in ways that will be meaningful to student success.
So you're going to tell me, did you want to say something, Kevin? Go ahead.
In these stories, I don't think we should be timid about making outlandish statements, and it might even be reasonable to say something along the lines of, schools alone cannot educate our youth. School or without parent involvement at some level, schools alone cannot educate or prepare our youth for their future. And then talk about the importance of involving parents.
I wouldn't call that outlandish, but
Yeah.
it gets at the issue because that's what the program does. The program believes, and there's some scientific evidence behind that. It isn't just somebody thinks it. there's some evidence that schools alone can't do everything.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, for the children. Okay, so that piques my interest. Well, do I have a role in this? What do you mean schools alone can't educate the children? And you're going to tell me about a program that does what?
Well, it's not very sexy, but it's
Really important. It may not be now, but we can make it so. We can make it so. Go ahead.
It is a structure for volunteerism within a school. So it allows schools to use volunteers. It allows volunteers to come into a school and be used effectively. That's what it is.
Okay, so this is really a language problem, right?
Yes.
Because this is a really good program
This is a really
that brings the community into the school.
Right.
So if we can think about some language that doesn't use program effectively, you know,
Right.
sort of the language that a lot of us tend to use in the nonprofit arena, if we can get away from that and use sort of real people language, the kind of emotional, you know, schools alone can't educate.
How about the language fostering better relationships?
I think we're getting warmer. I think we're getting warmer, but here's the thing. When you're telling a story in words, fostering better relationships, I don't exactly know what that means. That's one of those kind of phrases that is pretty general. You really want to, when you're telling a story, you would never really sit down and say, Jordan, I'm thinking of fostering better relationships.
So you would say,
I would
you're
say,
taking, you're
Jordan,
making, you're
I
building.
I need people to help teach these children. That, right? Because that's
right,
really
that's
what
an
I'm
appeal.
talking about. So you have to keep peeling back, and it's a process of writing it and scratching it out and writing again and scratching that out. Keep peeling back. What are you really talking about? And so are there some data that could help, Lynn? Are there some numbers that you could show, something from the research that would say, well, what do you mean a school can't educate?
Now, but I'm assuming that kind of data would be used after the first two sentences.
Possibly, but it might, remember how in Ron's it really pulled us in when he started telling us, look, we are in a place where 1 out of 3 girls is pregnant and half of the kids are dropping out.
That's
You know, it gives
actually,
me,
maybe
wow,
maybe
it gives me the sense of
Yeah.
urgency.
So
You know, if I'm fostering a program that blah, 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 that doesn't give me a sense of urgency. That tells me a very sort of,
So what
Flat.
I could open with 50% of all high school seniors fail to graduate in Denver. Schools alone can't educate students,
yeah, I might switch that.
okay?
Yeah, I might switch it and say,
support it.
schools alone can't educate children. In Denver, half of all students fail to graduate. Yeah, Kevin. Yeah, jump in,
I think
anyone.
the data point I'd want to know, and this acknowledges the limitations in families, is the limited amount of time that parents can dedicate during the day or at other times. So, I mean, you acknowledge that parents are a vital part of this, but then you also need to acknowledge those limitations, because then the call to action is that we need you, concerned person, to step in. I don't know what that data is.
Does anybody have any other thoughts on strengthening that? Because the story you're going to tell me is, the idea is it's going to inspire me to come and volunteer for this program, right? That's going to be the call to action, is to come. So something in the summary has to, I don't want to say warn me, but has to alert me that this is a story about I could do something. And so maybe it's some example of a success from that story.
Yes.
But a new, don't say program, a new effort. I am here to stamp out the word program. A new effort is changing, or, you know, you can keep working on it.
The real call to action here, though, is not getting people to volunteer. It's getting schools to put in what we call it, the name of it is the school service program, which is the structure to facilitate all of that. And that's really the call to action.
So this is aimed at schools?
This is aimed at schools.
So if I'm a school superintendent or some official like that, I need to know, if you're trying to convince me that this is something that works and I need to read this story and learn about whether it's something I want to do in my district, then think about what is that evidence that's going to persuade me to invest the time to read about it and consider using it.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Nicole?
Nicole Steffen.
Okay, thank you,
I'm with
Nicole.
West Staff. So my involvement with Floodlight's a little bit different. West Staff is interested in potentially using Floodlight. We have some connections with the Piton Foundation. So I'm not actually telling a real story. The tool that we're creating is providing data to arts organizations to help them better measure what's going on in their community. So I came up with a hypothetical situation. So I actually have the opposite problem. I have data, and I want people to understand what that data tells them about what's going on in their community.
Okay, well, give us a shot.
Okay, I don't want to derail anything
Right.
by
Give us a
heading
shot.
in a
Let's
different
see.
direction. So this is completely made up. These are just some of the numbers that we're dealing with right now. The hypothetical area is Fort Collins, and my sentences on them are: creative occupations in Fort Collins have increased 20% from 2010 to 2011. Specifically, growth in the fine arts jobs have went from 750 to 1,250, a 66% increase. The increase in these jobs has resulted in 4 more art festivals coming to Fort Collins.
Okay, we have to trim the sentences because you have 4. But no, I think so you could get data that, because you actually have numbers that would
we have
show
the
that.
numbers.
Okay, good. You don't have them today, but you have them. And I remember seeing something at the airport. There was a whole display at DIA about how creative industry was so vibrant in Colorado and how many jobs. It was really interesting. People were stopping and reading it. So I think it is something that you can really make, you're on the right track, I think. And you might even, give us those sentences again and let's
Okay.
hear them.
Creative occupations in Fort Collins have increased 20% from 2010 to 2011. Specifically, growth in the fine arts jobs have went from 750 jobs to 1,250, which is a 66% increase. The increase in these jobs has resulted in 4 more art festivals coming to Fort Collins.
Okay, so let me just give you a little bit of advice on data when they're figures like that. It's very hard for the human brain. The human brain can only hold, something like 3 facts at a time. There's research on this, and I can't remember what it was, because my brain obviously can't hold that many. I'm on the low end of the scale. So when you've packed a lot of facts and figures, so you have numbers, percentages, increases, try to simplify that for people. So she could say the number of creative jobs in Fort Collins is up by half. I forget now what you were saying, but 50% could become half. 66% becomes 2/3. It's just an easier thing for the brain to absorb. And if you say that it's up by 2/3, you don't actually have to give me both numbers then. In a summary, I can just say, wow, something's going on with the arts in Fort Collins. Now, what would really make me want to read this story? I'm really intrigued by the idea that there are more arts festivals, did you say? That there are more arts festivals. I want a little bit more on, I think I should be intrigued by that, but I bet, it's the jobs, it's the financial impact, and what is the story going to tell me? What do you want people to do with this information?
Well, that's always a challenge. It's in the tool that we're creating. One of the challenges is being able to show the economic impact within a community, and that is challenging because it's difficult to measure. Like for a festival, for instance, if money's being spent in the community, is it money that if the event wasn't going on, it would be spent elsewhere?
I see
So
what you're
that's
saying.
not actually new money.
So I think one of the things that you're going to have to focus on in using Floodlight is who is your audience? Are you telling this story to organizations who would use your services? Are you telling it to the public who would support the arts? Are you telling it on behalf of an organization that then wants to reach their audience? So I want you to think a little bit about that as you work on your summary for next month. Okay? Okay. Did anybody else have anything they want to add for Nicole? Jordan does.
So I like how at the end you said that for festivals, an increase in 4 festivals, and that's kind of getting at the why we care about the arts. And I thought that maybe that should come a little bit earlier in the summary, because if you start with, well, there's an increase in creative professions, I don't know, to me that didn't seem like quite the right place to start. I needed to have the why that matters to the community. I needed to have that sooner, I think.
And it's always good to compare too. So Jordan started hitting on things. Is that one of the fastest growing industries?
Yeah.
If that is, whoa, that gets my attention, even if I'm not interested in arts, which I am, but even if I weren't, that might really, so it's that data that you can pull in. Maybe you need to go to the State Department of Labor and get a list of how quickly jobs are growing in each industry for comparison, to bring that data in to really buttress your story. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Westwood, la ciudad oscura.
Westwood, the dark city. The city's too dark, so that's why he said Westwood, the dark city. Because from every 3 lights in every street, one is flashing and the other one is not working.
So, okay, I'm in, right? I'm in. That's good. That's good. So she has given me Westwood, the dark city. One of every 3 lights, out of every 3 lights, one doesn't work and one is flashing. Now I want to know why. Can you give me a little bit in the summary? Do you guys agree with this? In the summary, what is this story? So I'm intrigued. I have no idea what this story is going to be about, except there's something weird going on in Westwood. So can you give me a little bit more about what the story is going to tell me about?
So we've been talking to the people that live in the area to see what are the challenges that that community has. And we have realized that light is number 1 challenge that they are facing right now.
Here, take this one and then we don't have to.
Oh, okay, so my question is, what effects does not having light have? So does it mean that kids can't go outside and play because it's dark and they don't feel safe, or that people don't feel like they can walk to the store? What happens as a result of not having light?
In regards to the light, there is more robberies, and the kids are afraid to go and play in the street or in the parks.
Hello. Because light is a public service, I would want to know if efforts to communicate with the public service provider like Excel have been unsuccessful or unresponsive. And why should the community, how can the community help you?
Estamos teniendo nuestras reuniones.
So we have done some data collecting. We've been out in the streets, and we know how many lights are out. So we have talked with Excel, and they have promised us that those ones that are flashing, they are going to increase the voltage, and the other ones, they are going to change the lights. And we are also doing what kind of impact that will have in the community in terms of money.
I'm encouraged to think that that solution will happen. And maybe as the next part of the effort, the residents will have to look at whether they can put lights on outside of their homes or things like that, other types of lighting, because I think you could get money or other help to make even more light beyond the street lights, and the community may want to help.
We're doing that already.
Vamos a salir casa
So
por
we're
casa,
already doing those
le vamos
efforts.
a
We've been
escupir las
going to
uñas,
those
cuadros,
homes or those blocks that are very dark. We have talked to the owners, and we can bring them either light bulbs, or if they don't have the electrical connection, we can bring an electrician for them to provide the connection for that.
afuera.
Okay, so you may, in your summary, going back to the summary, you have a very, very good start to your summary. You may not want to get into Excel in the summary. That comes later in your story. But you may want to say in the summary that this is a story about how one community organization is bringing light. Yes, something like that, is bringing light, yes, So that I know this is going to be a story about something's happening. And it sets up, sort of the context of the story. Okay, this is fun. I hope we got a little bit of a late start, so we're a little bit behind, but let's keep going because I think this is good.
So I have changed mine like 3 times.
Good, yeah, that's
Because
what,
every time someone talks, it's like, oh, I shouldn't put program. Okay, let me take it.
get program out of there.
So I put, John has been suspended 2 times from his school. The 3rd time will be permanent. The Conflict Center have taught John emotional intelligence and critical decision-making skills to keep him in school, and have changed the culture of his school from punitive to restorative. And then I put an XX name of school, let's say Place Bridge Academy School, diminished 2/3 of its suspension in the year 2011.
What do you guys think of that?
I thought that was great.
I think so too. Can we help her with some improvement? Read it one more time for us. Sorry, Jordan.
Thank you. So I haven't found John yet, but
Right,
I
but
will
you
find
will.
him.
The idea is you will.
So John has been suspended 2 times from his high school. The 3rd time will be permanent. The Conflict Center have taught John emotional intelligence and critical decision-making skills to help him stay in school, and have changed the culture of his school from punitive to restorative. Place Bridge Academy School diminished 2/3 of its suspension in year 2011.
I really like that. I think now, as we keep going around, keep changing it, because you could tighten it even more and make it powerful and punchy. So in the first sentence, you had John, give me the first sentence again. I'm sorry, I lost it.
John has been suspended 2 times from his high school.
Okay, that's good. Then it's the second sentence.
Then the 3rd time will be permanent. The Conflict Center have taught John emotional intelligence and critical decision-making skills to help to keep him in school.
Okay. So emotional intelligence,
Too
critical, I think it's too jargony for the summary. And there was something at the end of the sentence that was jargony too. So you might just say,
I've taught him skills.
yes, you have taught him skills to keep him in school.
Okay.
And we've changed the school, the culture of the school. You don't have to tell me in the summary what the culture used to be and what it is now. You've changed the culture of the school. Okay, I'm curious about that. In the story, you can tell me what, restorative justice is. A lot of people won't know what that is. You can tell me in a comfortable,
So
ease
how
me
long
into it.
are the stories?
They can be whatever you want them to be. But my advice to you is,
No more than 3 minutes?
if it's a video, that's a very good, because that's sort of the cutoff of what people can tolerate online. For a text story, I would write it the way you want to write it, and then shrink it and tighten it and shrink it and tighten it, because it's going to be more powerful every time you do that. It's an excruciatingly painful experience to do it, but it's going to make your story a lot more powerful. Just as you've seen what you've done from this point to here, right?
Yeah.
So very good. Okay.
All right, well, we talk a lot about speaking to our different audiences, so I have two based on the audience that I'm speaking to, and you can tell me which one's more compelling. The first one is, despite improvements over the last few years, the graduation for Denver Public Schools stands at 56%, and 36% for students living at or below poverty. Yet education is the single greatest intervention in fighting generational poverty. Denver Kids is scaling its one-on-one counseling to address the dropout crisis and address the widening opportunity gap.
Who's that audience?
That would just be basic programmatic, and then we
Okay, so
have,
that's
then we
general.
speak to our funders in a different way. We provide more economic impact. So this is the second one.
Okay.
A high school dropout costs the community upwards of $200,000 over the life. Sorry. I have lots of cross-outs. A high school dropout costs the community upwards of $200,000 and over $1 million in lost earning potential over the course of their lifetime. Yet only 56% of our students are graduating. Denver Kids is scaling its services to address our dropout crisis and economic future.
I think you could combine those two for any audience, because what you're telling me is every time a kid drops out of school, it costs $1 million. Is that, do I have my, I'm sorry, my short-term memory is getting shorter.
It's
and
$1
shorter.
million in lost earning potential.
No,
but
what was the 200,000?
200,000, which includes like Medicaid,
Okay. Those are the actual costs.
unemployment, criminal justice system.
And, you know, keep tightening. Every time a kid drops out of Denver Public, a student, whatever word you want to use, every time a student drops out of Denver Public Schools, it costs society about $200,000. More than, and pick something, you know, that kind of gives you, wow, that's a lot of money. That would be, you know, I think the median income in Colorado is something like $45,000. So more than 4 times what the average person earns in Colorado, or something like that gives it context, maybe. And you can say then almost half of the students drop out. Now, this non-program, because we don't use that word, now, I'm sorry, give me the name, Denver Kids, and I'd like to hear a little bit, something more specific than we are going to address. Because if you're going to address, well, get back to me when you have a plan. Or if you have a plan, tell me now, and I might want to read more about it. What do you guys think? Go ahead, please.
I think that I like your idea of simplifying the numbers, because with so many numbers, you lost me at the second sentence. I'm like, 200, a million, what? So I think that by saying, you know, 1 million is very powerful, and then saying the rest on half, 2/3, that then I can keep the attention.
Now you may, I like that idea of there's $1 million in lost potential earning, but that's it's kind of a hard concept. So you either would probably want to figure out a way to really make it as clear as possible, or save it for the rest of the story, is kind of my thinking. Kevin, what do you think?
I used to work for an organization, Goodwill, that did a lot of mentoring for the same kind of population, and I would gravitate toward data like this, but I think it was much more impactful, even though this information is good, to just tell a statement about the importance of a mentor in a kid's life, you know, and maybe I would really encourage you to think about taking that data and setting it aside until you first tell the story about a mentor and a kid.
So is that what Denver Kids
So
does?
one of
They
the
offer
challenges that we
mentors?
have are people think that we're a mentoring organization.
Well, there you go.
And it's part of our programmatic approach. However, we do provide one-on-one educational counseling. So it's full-time paid staff members that have a caseload of 55 students that they follow long-term, so K through 12, and we follow these students that are at risk. My challenge with this is because we have a ton of data, and we think that data is very powerful, but again, not losing our audience in that data. but how we still use that to leverage how powerful it is. 72% of our students in Denver Public Schools live at or below poverty. That's $25,000 a year for a family of 4 or less, and 72% are living at that. So,
And that is a golden nugget. You know, when
Right.
you're writing a story and you can sprinkle golden nuggets of powerful wow kind of information, that will keep people reading the story. And that's a good, fabulous golden nugget. Probably not your summary. Your summary wants me to pull me in with something. And I'm not sure that you even, does it matter to me whether it's a volunteer mentor or a staff person who's following kids through? The point is, when an adult helps a student through school, they graduate, you know, they're 5 times more likely to graduate, or whatever your numbers say, but something that tells me there's a very serious problem, there's a potential solution, and there's a way for me to get involved. Yeah, please.
With the $1 million, I think it could be interesting to think of that as a percentage of GDP or a percentage of something that is a contextualized measurement. Because it could be really powerful, like if you add numbers.
and we present ourselves that way as kind of an economic stimulus package.
Yeah. Okay, very nice. Kevin, you want to take a shot?
Yeah, I changed right now, so there you go. Thanks for that whole tip. But I would just say, at Young Americans, kids 7 through 21 are generating money from their own businesses and are already on the path to financial self-sufficiency.
Okay, give it to us again, because I wasn't ready. I didn't know you were launching
Gonna
in.
end it.
Go ahead, yeah.
I would say young, and I was going to start with a data point I didn't know. So I was going to say something like, if your child is 10 years old, they may never work for a company that's going to be able to employ them or be able to provide for their retirement. At Young Americans, kids ages 7 through 21 are running their own businesses and generating money and are already on the path to financial independence.
Okay, what's the reaction there? Do you want to read?
Sorry. I like when you said 7 to 21 because young adults can be anything. But when you tell me that a 7-year-old had its own company, I'm like, oh my God, tell me more. So.
Yeah. I wonder, can you give me an example of a 7-year-old with a company?
Yeah, well, I was going to, if I had more time, then I would tell them, and I would probably say Miles Lewison was 7 when he first entered Young Americans business competition against his peers, and he lost 2 years in a row. So when he was 11, he won, and Miles started his business making sushi out of candy.
Oh, there was an article
But
about him in the paper.
yes, but it's my belief the kids make the best entrepreneurs because they're more creative and less afraid, and that's proven true because last year Miles competed in Colorado Startup Week, and against all entrepreneurs in Colorado that competed, Miles was the winner.
Well, do you?
And he was 11. He's 11.
Yeah. Do you want to say then,
Yes.
when Miles, I forgot his last name, was 11, he beat out however many adults in the entrepreneurship competition, or
Among the adults, right.
Yeah. So, and he got his start
At Young Americans.
Young Americans. Mm-hmm. Here's how.
And here's how it could
he
work for you.
And hundreds of others.
I think my call to action, as far as this is concerned, is probably to parents. Is that to the audience I was thinking I was talking to? Like if your child is 10 and you're worried about their future, don't be worried because your kid already has everything they need to be an entrepreneur. And here's an example of how that works.
Yeah, okay.
How that could work and how other kids are already doing it.
Okay.
So
I would play around with somehow combining what you wrote first with what we've talked about second.
I'm going to definitely look for some other data.
Pulls you in. I think it really pulls
Yeah,
you.
if it wasn't just the opening, I would have told a story there.
Well, right, but we've got to get this first, and then you can do the rest. This is the hard part.
No,
It really
thank
is.
you.
Sure. It is, isn't it?
All right. Glenn's passion was boxing. He volunteered at Moorhead Recreation for a year before being hired as a permanent staff. Today, he's a personal trainer and teaches boxing fitness class to youth and adults. At Moorhead Recreation Center, we purposely and actively engage our residents to become leaders and help and use their assets and gifts and talents to contribute to the center and to their community.
The challenge, I think, on a lot of these is going to be not sounding like the marketing arm. This is the storytelling arm. So, Ruben, if you were sitting down, just you and I, having a cup of coffee, and I said, what does the center really do? How does it change lives?
The problem is that there's a lot of facets to that, so.
Yeah, it's
one
tough.
of
No,
many.
I understand. Give us that again, and let's think about if there's a way to
Start from
really.
the very beginning? Well, I've got 2 or 3 versions of it, so that's why I said.
That's good, yeah.
It said Glenn's passion was boxing. He volunteered at Moorhead Recreation Center for 1 year before being hired as a permanent staff. Today, he's a personal trainer and teaches boxing fitness to youth and adults. At Moorhead Recreation Center, we purposely and actively engage our residents as leaders, using their assets, gifts, and talents to contribute to the rec center and their community.
So, yeah, go ahead, Jordan. Well, I think you've got a mic, but go ahead.
What I think is really cool about that story is that this person, Glenn, turned his interest, his hobby, into something that could help the community at large. And I think that's kind of the nugget there, is that it's not just a hobby anymore. It's something that's going to change the lives of everyone living there. And I think maybe if there was a cleaner or tighter way to say that would be really powerful.
Was
But
Glenn,
also
go ahead.
his career too.
Yeah.
His career and what you said, it would be the complete thing to me.
Is it true, Ruben, that, is there any way to sort of juxtapose, to sort of heighten the drama? Because stories tend to have, they set out a problem and then the problem is resolved, right? Problem and resolution. Is there a way to describe Glenn?
You want more?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I want something different. And I'm wondering,
Well, I'll give you another
statistics
scenario.
would have suggested Glenn, wouldn't go to college or wouldn't come back to his community or whatever it is.
Well, the story that I say
Yeah.
about him is this, is that if you'd have looked at him on a resume, for example, if I looked at him on a resume, if I were to hire him as a staff, he wouldn't have qualified because he didn't have experience, he didn't have education. So normally he would have went to this pile. But due to the fact that he volunteered for a year, I got to see him do his job, and I knew that, I could educate him. I've always said that with anybody, is that education is a piece. He just never had opportunity in his life to pursue what he wanted. So that's a question I ask everybody that I interview. The question I ask is, if you have all the money, if you had all the money you needed, all the education you wanted, what actually would you be doing in your life? Because we do things because of money or education, but then we find out that neither one are actually satisfying. It's actually the passion that you have. And that's what I pull out of people, is their passion. I don't want the fact they want money or they want a specific career. I want what they're passionate about.
Yeah. So I really like the idea of starting with Glenn and maybe getting at just what you described there. That what your center is doing is more than just, offering recreation opportunities. It's changing lives and the community.
Ruben, what's the call to action? Is this something where you're going to ask me for money to build on these efforts, or are you asking for people in the community to lend their passion to in a specific way?
Our key is to integrate everybody's passions and assets. I look at them as assets for us, to utilize them for the community, to use them for the center, to use it for their own well-being. It doesn't have to profit me. They don't have to bring me money. It's never about money. I feel that follows. If you're successful, the money follows that, and we've proven that.
And is your center different than other rec centers?
Ours is
in
the only one
sense?
that does that in the whole city of Aurora.
Okay, so that's important, because maybe I wouldn't be, even if I don't live near your center, maybe I might not be involved in it. I may be near my own, and I want to know what you guys are doing, because maybe it needs to be implemented over here. That's a really powerful thing too. We're the only one is a powerful thing to say. Yeah. Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Do we all need to have call for action?
The Floodlight story prompts you, the Floodlight tool prompts you for a call to action. The idea is that there's some reason for people to be reading or watching these stories. That I invest reading and watching in it, and then there's something for me to do at the end. But that's a wide possibility of things. So it may be, kind of the traditional call to action, give money, write a letter, go clean up a riverbank, or it may be more subtle than that. And I'm struggling to think of a very subtle example of a call to action, but maybe it's something that, share this story with someone. Okay. And Floodlight is even going to allow you to send it out on your social networks, to direct it toward lawmakers, to stop me if I'm overstating what we're doing here, but it's going to be a really powerful tool, and there'll be a wide range of options. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional call to action. It can be just, if you were touched by this story, share it.
When I think of call to action, I think of when someone reads your story, what do you want them to do next? And that might be as simple as read more about the issue, whatever the issue may be, or it may be something more complex. But it's just we want to encourage you to tell stories that will inspire people to do something once they read the story. Okay. Now, did you want to have a shot? Go ahead then. And then Antonio will come back to you if you want to.
Okay, I'm a farmer's market, so I had quite a challenge. Mo Better Green Marketplace is the first urban farmers market that creates community connectedness by connecting the residents of Denver's inner city food desert to affordable local foods, ideas for using food as medicine, scrumptious recipes and samples, links to green practices, and nature experiences, all while enjoying live music and having fun.
Okay, who wants to jump in? Go ahead, Kevin. I'm hungry after that.
I think the point maybe that I wanted to hear the most about was the food desert, because I think I know a little bit about what you're talking about, but I would almost start with the situation that this community faces in terms of access to fresh food or prices around fresh food and access to fresh food. And then I would talk about how this has changed lives through nutrition and medicine or cooking at home or things like, as opposed to reliance on restaurants and other options. Because, we're all passionate about our programs, and I think if we start to list the benefits, then it becomes more of a marketing piece at times.
I think that's something to watch out for, because it's easy to slip into the mission and marketing, which is not really the storytelling. Mission and marketing is important, and there are places you're going to need that. But the storytelling, is there a story that came out of your experience with Mo Better Greens? Is there someone who used to...
No S, green.
Pardon?
No S.
No S, sorry, Mo Better Green. Is there a story of someone who used to only eat fast food or have to, drive across the city, or did something? Is there a story that you could tell?
Totally the opposite, because I do dwell on that all the time. I never get to say this part. I always talk about that part. Always. So I can do it. I have a lot about that.
Okay.
But Laura, isn't all the stuff that she said here, isn't all of the stuff that she said here, couldn't that follow those first two sentences that pull you in with the example, and then you still get to say all that stuff
in your story?
Yeah.
For sure. A good point, Lynn. Yeah. This is just, so imagine the Floodlight tool, and when we get the sneak peek, you're going to see what we mean. So if you're searching around for an interesting story, or you're looking for a story on a particular topic, and I see your story, The summary is going to be, I'm going to see a headline, which we're going to talk about in a second, and I'm going to see the summary. And that's going to be what I use to decide, do I want to click through and invest my time in this story? So you have to have something, you don't have to tell the whole story in the summary, which the summary kind of, that word makes us think of, okay, it's everything in a nutshell. This is just something that pulls you in to the rest of the story. Yeah, okay? All right, there'll be time. This is what we're going to work on next month. Antonio, do you want to give it a shot?
I'll try something.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about starting off by saying, BAM! That's how it was.
Okay, I got my attention. Yeah.
Or like, knock knock, who's there? Opportunity. Opportunity who? Opportunity for you. And then it just ends. No? All right, but it doesn't matter. Okay. At least I drew you guys in, though.
Yeah,
But,
that's right. Now we're listening.
My concern is, my topic is about the social behaviors of people. It seems to me that seems to be the target for most of us. We're trying to target audience. Social groups, different cultures, and I feel like we're targeting symptoms of people's problems and not really attacking the core. So I don't really know how to say it in my words, but here's what I have right now. Man has an untapped well of psychological potential, previously hindered by pathological social behaviors, where 95 to 99% of man's behavior is managed by the subconscious mind. There's no better time for change than now. Biologist Bruce Lipton offers insight in the process of change. And I don't know what else you can say in 2 sentences.
Right, it's hard to boil it down. So you're going to tell me a story about how a psychologist, Bruce Lipton.
Actually, he's a biologist.
Oh, biologist. Sorry. Biologist Bruce Lipton has found.
Is connected. I'm trying to find the best way to say it, but he's identified how the biological computer responds to the environment around them, and how the mind is almost like the media, the facilitator of all the operations, and how at a young age people are adopting all these different ideas and programs that they themselves as they grow up want to change. But my first 2 sentences are just trying to say, if you want to change some of those behaviors and so on, there's still hope, and there's so much potential that you have that you may not see in yourself.
And there was a 95%.
The subconscious mind controls basically 95 to 99% of your daily life. And that's the tape recorder in your mind that's basically adopted all these behaviors and so that you yourself didn't put there, but they operate all the time. Like, see, people's like when they're sitting here just thinking, like you playing with your palm. It's not something you sit there and just think about consciously.
Yeah, but I'm doing it
exactly.
Anyway. Right.
So,
okay, so this is interesting. Does anybody want to jump in? I think what caught my attention was the part when you got to the biologist. So the stuff at the beginning, I wasn't quite sure where you were going with it, right? So you don't want to give people a confused or frustrated feeling, the very first feeling.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not criticizing, I'm just, what you want to look out for is a lead-in that's too long before you get to your point. It's a very common, thing to look out for. Everybody needs to look out for. So you may want to, when you rework it, think about a way to rework it with this guy and the idea that most of what we do, almost everything we do, is controlled by the subconscious. And he's researching or discovering or whatever he is doing ways to change or to connect. I'm not quite sure what is the right word, but what he's doing. So you're setting it up in a way that gives me context of what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Does anybody else want to jump in? Danny, is there anything that you've heard that you want to jump in on? How are we doing there in New York?
You're doing just great. I'm trying not to jump in because I know this delay throws everyone off. So no, it sounds great.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're just going to touch on a couple more things. When you see Floodlight, there will be some things that might not be familiar words. One is a byline, but if you've ever read a newspaper, you've seen a byline. It's just what it means. Who's the story by? Well, the byline for Kevin's story would be Kevin Jones. That's the byline. Easy enough. A headline, if you've ever read a newspaper, you've seen the headlines. The headline is that sort of not really a full sentence, but kind of a sentence that gives you a sense of what this story is going to be about. I think it's kind of a toss-up, which is more important, the headline or the summary. Jordan, are we going to see both when we see a story? That helps you because I started to say this earlier, there has been research that shows when people see a headline online, 8 out of 10 people will read the headline, but only 2 out of 10 will go ahead and read the rest of the story. So the pressure is on you to make a so compelling headline. It's kind of an art form. I can give you a few tips if you want to take some notes. When you're writing a headline, you really want to use words that show action. Something is happening. You want to use words that highlight the topic of interest. So if I'm scanning and I see organic food in the headline and I'm interested in that topic, I'm going to stop and read the rest of her headline with more care. And your headline, very similar to your summary, is a promise to the reader of what they're going to get if they read your story, if they invest time. So be forewarned, next month when you come, you will be writing headlines for your story. We're running behind time, so we're not going to try writing headlines now. But again, remember, headlines aren't full sentences. There's never a period at the end. It is a phrase or an almost sentence that gives you a sense of what the story is going to be about. And we'll work on those next month. And then the third thing we've been talking about quite a bit already is the call to action. And Floodlight is going to prompt you for a call to action. Some of you who were here last month had a pretty good grasp. And in our discussions today, I think a lot of you have a good grasp on what the call to action is. Again, like Jordan was saying, it's what you hope people will do after they read your story. So it may be something, again, very specific, like donate money or go clean up the riverside, or it may be something more subtle, like share this with your friends, go to this other site to read more information, become educated and engaged on this, come to a meeting about it. It could be any number of things, but you're going to see a prompt for a call to action, and you want to be prepared to put something in there for people to do. So does anybody, before we kind of close up and wrap up and go have our sneak peek at Floodlight, does anybody have any questions or thoughts, hopes for the next training, burning issue they want to raise? As we're moving along, you're feeling kind of overwhelmed. So we've just taken your whole big story and boiled it down into 2 sentences. It's not an easy thing to do, folks, and I think you guys did a marvelous job at it. So I'm really encouraged by this, and I think we're going to have some powerful stories on Floodlight when you get them up there. We are going to, here's the big news, we're going to have some homework for you. But this is going to help you be prepared for the next training. And we are going to send this to you. It's also on your clipboards there. So the homework is actually getting a piece of evidence, this data we've been talking about. Each week, you will submit a piece of evidence for your story, a piece of data for your story. And it's going to go like this. The first week, you will learn how to upload a picture to Flickr. F-L-I-C-K-R, if you've never used it, it's pronounced Flickr, even though it's a little bit confusing on how to use it. But if you don't have access to a digital camera and you don't have access to a computer, don't panic, because we will help you. And we will be sending instructions for you that will help walk you through it. The second week, we're going to upload a video to YouTube. Again, with instructions, and if you need equipment, we can help you with that. The Piton Foundation has equipment, or we can help you find some close to you. We will help you brainstorm ways to get around any technical difficulties that you have. Yes, sir.
One of the difficulties that we have with this is getting parent permission to use minor images, and so I don't know, it's something we could talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We have forms you can use to do that, kind of a canned, this is a form that you can use to get permission, and eventually those will be up on Floodlight. But in the meantime, we can give you the one that we use in order to get permission so that you can use that.
Just a quick follow-up on that. It used to be you would get permission from a parent and you could use a child's image for a year or so, but now, of course, anything that's out there is out there permanently. I wonder, I'm just curious if the legal community has looked into just the idea of if a parent gives permission, it's good in perpetuity, because it's hard to pull an image back.
Yeah, I don't know of any limits on that.
I don't think there are.
I don't think so. I don't think so either. I think you're good. Right.
Okay.
The third week, we're uploading audio to SoundCloud. Now again, these don't have to be magnificently produced, fabulous things. You can be taking pictures, videos, and sound recordings on a smartphone if you have one. If you don't have anything to record audio with, you can dial into a number that we're going to give you and leave, like you're leaving a voice message, leave the audio recording on this, and we will automatically create a digital file that will be there for you to use on Floodlight.
Does this have to be related to the story we're writing, or can be anything we have? Like, let's say I'm gonna write the story and not a video.
Well, I would really like it to be related if you can, because what we're going to do in the third training is hands-on, uploading all of this to Floodlight, and it's going to turn out to be a fabulous package. But let me tell you, it doesn't have to be a beautifully produced video. It can be whatever your story is, and you go and interview one of your key people with your cell phone for a 30-second video clip of Jordan saying how great Floodlight is because I'm writing about Floodlight. It doesn't have to be fancy. We just want you to practice using these things. And if it's a nice package, you may like the way it turns out so well that you're happy that you have all of these pieces. So I would not strive for perfection, but do strive for all of these pieces to have something to do with your story, if at all possible. The fourth week, we're going to use data in the sense of numbers, of facts and figures. And we will be uploading numbers to a Google spreadsheet. And eventually in Floodlight, you will be able to embed, we can make graphics from this. And don't worry, we send you links to instructions of what to do, and you can embed, you guys are going to be embedding graphics in your story. How cool is that? Yeah. So imagine what your skill level is going to be just a month from now. Yeah. So we'll be sending all of this to you in an email, and you also have already it in a hard copy. So now we will adjourn to the snack area and have a sneak peek of Floodlight. Thanks, everyone.